Yesterday, some of you celebrated 4th of July, Independence Day. It's a great big holiday here in the States. It has a lot of significance. Now, some of that has been lost over time because it's about a little bit more than hot dogs and fireworks. It had to do with freedom. Our freedom, we know, is not free. Freedom came with a cost. Many times, freedom that we have, our personal freedoms, our spiritual freedoms, came with a price that somebody else paid. The Declaration of Independence was actually not on the 4th of July. They got together and they drafted this. And I think their first thing was on the 1st or the 2nd of July. And then on the 4th is when they made it official. Wars are not won from a distance. You see, these men, back in the early stages of this country's history, recognized that wars are not won from a distance. I don't care what kind of war it is. If it's your personal internal war, even that is not won from a distance. If it's country against country, if it is not won from a distance. I know sometimes we'd like to think that they are. But at some point, at some time in our conflict, there has to be boots on the ground. Even with all of our modern technologies, even with missiles that can strike pinpoint accuracy the target that they were intending from miles away, they don't even see what they're targeting. They're at controls and they can pinpoint where the target is and strike. Even with that, even with the drones, even with that, there still comes a point that there has to be boots on the ground. Now, obviously, this morning, we're not just talking about worldly conflicts. And we're not talking about American history. We're talking about things deeper than that. One of the first things you have to do if you're going to be successful in any conflict, in any war, in any personal battles, you have to know what you stand for. There's a phrase that says, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. The Declaration of Independence. Those guys, they signed that knowing that they were putting their lives at risk. They were putting their families' lives at risk. They were putting all their possessions at risk. But they knew what they stood for. You have to know what you stand for or you're not willing to stand. Look, John Hancock's, look how big his signature is. He said, I will make my signature so big the king would not need his glasses to read it. That took courage. That took boldness to know that when you're signing this, that's your life you're signing. That's really something you believe in if you're willing to lay your life out there for it. Benjamin Franklin said, we must all hang together, or in other words, we must band together and stick together. We must all hang together, or assuredly, we will all hang separately. That's pretty clever. But it was true, and they believed it, and they knew it, and they stood for that. And there were those that were in the Congress that said, let's not do this, let's wait. But they had enough that they decided to go forward with it, and they signed it. Every one of them signed. One of the guys later recanted. He got captured by the British, and so he denounced the Declaration of Independence, and he became a British soldier. And then eventually he became back with the revolution, but it took him over a year before he ever got, after he got out of prison and out of the British Army, after they put him in there, after he got out, before he was able to get his life back together, because it messed up his life, because he walked away from what he believed in. We must all hang together, or assuredly we will all hang separately. Patrick Henry said, "I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." If you're looking at your life this morning, is there anything that you would be willing to say that for? Give me liberty or give me death. Jesus Christ says, if I set you free, you're free indeed. But are you willing to stand for it like that? Give me liberty or give me death? An interesting side note I thought was kind of interesting. Thomas Jefferson, after all of that, and July 4th being a big significant day in what he had a part in and what he signed on, also became the date of his death, July 4th, 1826. What I thought was also kind of ironic was the very same day, just hours apart, John Adams also passed away. Both of them on July 4th. I thought that was kind of amazing, but that's just a side note, sorry. I just thought it was interesting trivia. Joshua, though, said in Joshua 24:15, "And if it seems evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." He had a solid conviction no matter who was going to stand with him. And obviously, it wasn't just a stranger that he was talking to. It would be like me and you talking to each other. Sometimes your family, sometimes your friends, sometimes your fellow Christians can be the most deadly to you when it comes to your spiritual walk. But he said, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. He was willing to stand. Do you know what you stand for? Are you willing to stand? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Remember the three Hebrew young men? I love this story because I love the response. Nebuchadnezzar built this great image. It was supposed to be a representation of him and his kingdom and his power. And they believed that if you were king, you were God. And so he made a decree for everyone to bow down and worship him. And they said no, they weren't going to do it. And the decree was not like happens here in the States where you can do a crime and you may be on death row for 50 years, 20, 30 years. This was a decree that said within the hour, you will be thrown into a hot, fiery furnace. And this was their response. Daniel 3:17, "If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king." But this is the part that I really, really like. This next verse, verse 18 says, "But if not, be it known unto you, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up." Even if God was not going to deliver them, they were still going to stand for what they believed in. How about you? How about us? Do we have that conviction? What about Peter? Did he stand for what he believed in when they came to get Christ? Did he stand? No, he didn't. God told him he wouldn't stand, and he didn't believe him. But when it came right down to it, at that point in time in his life, he did not stand. If you don't know what you stand for, you will not stand when there's adversity. You will cower back, or you will turn and run, or you will give in. But you will not stand, just as Peter did not stand. Now, thank God, later on, he came to his senses. And he repented, and he came back to God in a mighty way. But at that moment in time, he did not stand. You have to know what you stand for, or you will not stand. Wars are lost when we fail to act. Just doing nothing about it is not good enough. Problems don't go away. If there's something in your life that's causing you to be separated from God, just ignoring it does not get rid of it. I'll give you a few examples. The Battle of Gettysburg, fought July 1 through July 3, 1863. It was one of the bloodiest battles in American history. And there came a point where the South had the edge. And if they had known it and they had moved forward, they could have ended that battle before the reinforcements ever got there. But the Union soldiers did little tactics to make them think there were more guys than they had. And they fell for it. They failed to act. If you fail to act, you lose. And that's exactly what happened to them. They failed to act. By the time they recognized it, the reinforcements were there and the battle continued. And they lost. In our own personal lives, if there's something going on in our life and we fail to act, we lose. Is it worth that? 2 Kings chapter 7. In this chapter, if you get a chance later today, read through this chapter. And you'll see this story of Elisha talking to the king of Israel, telling him, because they're surrounded by Syrians, and they are being starved. They have no food. They're being starved to death. And he tells him, by this time tomorrow, there's going to be food everywhere. It'll be selling for pennies on the dollar. And the king says, even if God opened the windows of heaven, would that happen? And Elisha told this king, it will happen, and you'll see it with your eyes, but you won't eat any of the food. Now, there were 4 lepers that were getting pretty hungry. And they decided that if they just kept going on and didn't act, they were going to starve to death. And that's basically what the rest of the city was doing. They were being starved to death. And they said, if we don't act, what's going to happen to us? Let's go to the Syrians and see if they'll take care of us. What's the most that can happen? They kill us? We're going to die anyway. So they went to the Syrian camp, and what they found were empty tents. The Bible says that God caused great noises of chariots to happen in the night, and the Syrians got so afraid, they just picked up and took off, and they were dropping things all along the way. These 4 lepers went through the camp, and they found tents with all kinds of food and all kinds of gold and valuables, and they just took whatever they wanted, and they feasted, and then they went and told people. And the king still didn't want to do nothing about it, but finally he sent people to check it out, and it turned out that they came, and yes, because they thought it was a trap. He thought it was a trap, that they were just waiting for them to come. But it turned out not to be a trap. God had delivered. And they went, got the food, and as they're coming in to the city with all this food, the king got trampled on, and was killed. Just like Elijah said, God delivered, but because you didn't act, and because you didn't believe, and you didn't act in faith upon what he gave you to act upon, you won't benefit from it. That happens to us. God gives us answers in his word. He gives us promises. He gives us assurances that he will provide for us and be with us. But if we don't act upon it, we will pay the price. Wars are lost when we fail to act. And if you don't believe it, Ezekiel 3:18 says, "When I say to the wicked, you shall surely die, and you give him no warning, nor speak to warn the wicked from his wicked ways." This is what God says is the result. To save his life, that same wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood I will require at your hand. Is that not powerful stuff? If we fail to act, if we fail to reach out and help other people and reach out and bring souls to God, he will require their blood on our hands. That's pretty critical. So there are results when you fail to act. Wars are lost when we fail to act. Face your demons. Everything that's taking place in our lives takes place in our lives. Sometimes you can't get along with somebody, so you move to another section and go somewhere else, but you have the same problem. Why? Because, like the song says, wherever you go, there you are. You know, you're still there. The problem's still there. It's internal. You have to allow God to work out things in your life. Face your demons. You've seen and you've heard the old saying about don't be like the ostrich and sticking your head in the sand. You know, we use that analogy to say that we're ignoring things. Well, actually, guys, honestly, ostriches don't stick their head in the sand. If they did, they would suffocate. That's somewhat of a myth. What they're actually doing when people see this is they have a hole in the ground with their eggs in it. And several times throughout the day, they'll stick their head down that hole to turn the eggs, waiting for them to hatch. But we've used this as putting your head in the sand, not accepting realities. We're very good at doing that in our own lives. But if we do that, nothing gets done. Christians are very good about putting their heads in the clouds. And what I mean by that is we're willing to have a situation come up or something in our lives, and we pray about it. And that's it. Prayer is a powerful thing, but many times I've seen it, and I believe it, that many times Christians will use that as a crutch to not do anything. Face your demons. You have to, at some point in your life, face off with the enemy. There has to be boots on the ground. You can't keep flying in the clouds, thinking that if as long as you pray about it, everything's good. James 2:14 says, "What does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say to them, 'Depart in peace, be warmed and filled,' but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead." You have to act. A failure to act is a definite loss. You will lose the battle if you don't respond. Heaven put boots on the ground. Since the beginning of time, since this earth was created, and even before, there has been a war waging between good and evil, between God and Satan, between heaven and hell. And even in that battle, even in that war, it was not won without heaven putting boots on the ground. Jesus Christ came to this earth and walked this earth for me and for you. It took boots on the ground. It took bloodshed. It took him hanging on a cross, sacrificing for us. And I believe this morning that he's calling us to be his boots on the ground. But I believe that sometimes we don't want to act. We're afraid to. We're afraid of what it might mean, what we might have to give up, what those personal things in our lives are that we really don't want to turn loose of right now. So we stick our head in the sand and forget about it and act like it's not a problem. Well, problems don't go away just because you act like they don't exist. God's calling us to be his boots on the ground. How you respond is up to you. Jeremiah 18:12, when they were called upon, he says, and they said, "That is hopeless. We will walk according to our own plans, and we will everyone obey the dictates of his evil heart." That was one choice. The 2 Timothy 1:12 said, "For the which cause I also suffer these things. Nevertheless, I am not ashamed, for I know whom I have believed, and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him against that day." We have choices to make. Freedom is not free. It comes with a cost. It comes with a price. In this country, there has been many, many souls lost and blood shed to give us the freedoms that we have. In our spiritual life, there has been one blood shed. The only one that could be, Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And the Word of God says nobody took his life from him. He laid it down for us. Are we willing to lay down our lives for him? Are we willing to reach out and reach up and allow him to use us and allow him to work out those demons in our lives? Allow him to help us help others? Those are decisions that we each one have to personally make. And trust me, it's not a one-day thing. We have to make those decisions every single day because the enemy's not sleeping. But we have to face off with the enemy. Wars are not won from a distance. You can't connect with someone in your cubicle at work if you don't associate with anyone and you stay right in there in your little cubicle. You can't connect with someone in this community if you've never even seen the sidewalk. You can't connect with someone in your neighborhood if you've never knocked on the door or if you drive right into the garage and let the remote put the door down. Wars are not won from a distance. And this is a battle that must be fought. The battle between good and evil. The battle for the rescue of souls. They're in the clutches of the enemy. God's calling us to be his boots on the ground. Are you willing to do that this morning? Are you willing to be those boots on the ground?